I want to read you something. This action is being extended solely as a goodwill gesture in recognition of their loyalty to Princess Cruises. Loyalty. That's the word they landed on. 7 months after the worst cruise experience in my parents' lives, a credit card dispute that resolved in our favor, and months of collection letters and phone calls to two people in their mid-70s who just wanted this whole experience to be over with, the word they chose was loyalty. I want to unpack everything that led to that sentence, because there's another exhausting chapter to this story that I haven't told yet. And this week, it finally ended. At least, I hope so. If you saw my original cruise video, you know the broad strokes. October 2025, Regal Princess, my parents, my wife, and me tried to go on a cruise. An oil spill shut down the port, the only destination was canceled, there was a compensation offer structured in a way that made leaving financially worse than staying. And then 18 hours in, we walked. We chose time over money. That video was really about decision making and sunk costs. The idea that time is our most valuable resource, and that we stay in bad situations because we're irrationally attached to what we've already spent, and that sometimes the better move is to stop trying to salvage something that's clearly broken when you still have another choice. The cruise was just a specific example of a very universal trap. But there's one final chapter that happened in the background the entire time. Here's what I haven't shared until now. When we got home from the cruise, my wife and I tried to work things out and get a more reasonable refund, ultimately disputing the charge through our credit card. And to talk about brands that earn loyalty through this, Chase handled their part exceptionally well. The process was clear, they communicated throughout, and in January, we received this notice that the disputes had been resolved in our favor. A significant portion of what we paid was reversed. It wasn't everything, but it was close enough that we decided it wasn't worth continuing to push and we were just genuinely ready to move on. We thought the story was over then. Then exactly 2 months later, my parents started receiving collection notices. Before I get into what happened next, I need to quickly explain how chargebacks actually work, because I had no clue until this mess. When I tried to look it up on YouTube, I found plenty of content explaining chargebacks from the merchant side, particularly for small vendors. But there's very little explaining what the experience actually looks like from the consumer side. When you dispute a charge, you're not really arguing directly with the cruise line. You're starting this whole invisible chain reaction between your bank, the card network, their bank, and the merchant. You file it, they respond, there's a back and forth you never see, and eventually the bank says you win or lose. In our case, the dispute resolved in our favor. So naturally, I assumed that this whole issue was over. Absolutely adorable. Then, 2 months later, Princess started sending my parents collection notices. I called up Chase, and the representative told me that this kind of post-chargeback billing was unfortunately not unusual. A credit card dispute might resolve the issue through the payment network, but it doesn't necessarily mean the merchant's internal billing or accounts receivable system sees it that way. From your bank side, the dispute's done. Money moved, case closed. But inside the company, one department might see a chargeback, somewhere else they see an unpaid balance. Another might simply just start sending whatever notice the system tells it to send. And in our case, it seems like that's what happened. So for the details, on January 27th, we received a notice that the dispute had resolved in our favor. Exactly 2 months later, my parents received a collection notice from Princess Cruises stating that their original onboard account had been left unpaid, and it is very important that you remit payment in full upon receipt of this letter. The amount was $897.39. That was incredibly interesting to me because it wasn't even the same number as the chargeback. And here's another detail worth noting. My wife and I disputed our charges through the same process. Both transactions were on my card. Both disputes resolved in our favor. My wife and I never received a single collection notice. Only my parents received repeated, "Please remit payment immediately" letters. I'm not going to speculate on why. I'm just telling you that's what happened. Once the collection notices started, my parents forwarded them to me and I told them I'd handle it. I paid for the cruise, the dispute had gone through my account, I had all the documentation, and frankly, I just wanted my parents to be done with all of it. They'd already lived through the original experience. They didn't need to spend their time dealing with an accounts receivable department. So I called up Princess. I explained the situation, the chargeback had been resolved in our favor, we disputed the balance. Could someone please look into this and stop the collection notices? What followed was an absolutely remarkable little tour through corporate bureaucracy. I was transferred to the accounts receivable department, which was fully equipped to accept payment, but completely unable to do anything else. They then transferred me to a different department, still nothing. Then to somebody else. Then I got booted into their automated phone system, which assured me that it could help, which was a bold claim because it clearly could not.
I know you'd like to speak with an agent, but I might be able to help you even faster.
Eventually, I reached another human being, explained the whole situation again, and was told she could only direct me to a generic customer service email. So I emailed the whole situation in writing and heard nothing. Letters kept coming. Every 2 weeks, same letter, same amount, 2 weeks later in the date. This is where the structure became clear. The payment collection process was seamless. There was a phone number, billing system, and a very consistent mailing schedule. The process for resolving a dispute that didn't involve handing over a credit card number was, as best I could tell, a labyrinth that completely emptied into a void. My parents would receive another notice, forward it to me. I would assure them that I was handling it. I would try, and then nothing would move. Every new letter created another wave of stress. And that anxiety leads to the question that I think companies are counting on. Should we just pay to make it stop? Forget whether we actually owe the money. At a certain point, $900 feels cheaper than the ongoing cognitive and emotional cost of fighting something that refuses to budge. You've made 5 phone calls that went nowhere. You sent emails that never get a response. And you keep getting the same exact collection letter every 2 weeks. And every time it arrives, you have to spend energy on it again. That's the strategy. Create friction. You don't even need a specific villain for this to work. You just need a gap where none of the humans involved have anything in their script about resolving the issue. With enough repetition, giving in and paying begins to feel cheaper than resistance. And then Princess started calling my parents directly. At this point, the situation stopped being something to handle informally and required a more targeted, documented approach. So I wrote a formal letter, sent via certified mail with return receipt, sending 1 copy to Princess Cruises in California and a 2nd copy to Carnival Corporation's head office in Miami. I wanted someone outside of the please remit payment loop to be on the record. My letter made 3 things clear. The credit card dispute had been resolved in our favor in January. We formally disputed the balance Princess was still pursuing, and I was acting as my parents' authorized representative, so all future communication needed to come to me in writing. At a minimum, I wanted the collection notices and the phone calls to my parents to stop. After both Princess and Carnival received that certified letter, my parents got another collection notice and phone call. So I started leaving direct messages for the representative assigned to the case, repeating the same points from the letter. And then finally, 7 months after we walked off the ship, we received another letter. After further review, we have elected to dismiss the $897.39 referenced in the collection notices. This action is being extended solely as a goodwill gesture in recognition of their loyalty to Princess Cruises. There's a lot going on in that sentence. Notice how they chose the word dismiss. That one word does a lot of heavy lifting. It makes it sound like they're doing us a favor instead of admitting they were wrong. There's no acknowledgement that the credit card dispute had already resolved this through the card network. No explanation of where this new balance actually came from or why it was different from the chargeback amount. Just a gracious decision to dismiss what they apparently still consider a valid claim. The letter also notes that additional collection notices may still arrive within the next 30 days, and if so, they can be disregarded, which might be the most accidentally honest sentence in the entire thing. Even the resolution letter had to acknowledge that the machine might keep doing its thing for another month before it noticed that the case was closed. The letter closes with one final flourish, mentioning that the previously issued future cruise credit will still be available to apply towards their next Princess cruise. I did want to note, as I was going through this process, I found several social media threads of people who disputed charges with Princess or Carnival and subsequently received notices that they were banned from sailing those lines entirely. So there's apparently a version of this story where the implied threat is that you lose access to the product that you just had the worst vacation on in your life, followed by months of collection attempts. I genuinely don't think that's the threat that they believe it is. But back to loyalty. After 18 hours on the cruise, my original video, months of credit card dispute, collection letters, and painful phone calls where no one could do anything but accept payment, then 2 certified letters. After all that, the letter that resolves this was their decision as a reward of loyalty. But back to my life lessons, I want to address an obvious tension here. My original video, at its core, was an argument about sunk costs. I said that time is our most valuable resource, and that we often stay in bad situations because we're irrationally attached to what we already spent. I hear the comments now. If I made a whole video on sunk costs, why on earth did I spend months fighting over $900? And that's a fair point. I've asked myself the same thing multiple times. The honest answer is, it didn't feel the same to me. If I look at the math, it doesn't look great. I add up all the phone calls, emails, documentation, letters, postage, follow-up, and even hours of sleep lost worrying about this. I'm not sure that this was the most efficient or healthy use of my time. But I also don't think it was the same decision. Sunk cost thinking spends present resources to try to change a past outcome. The cruise has already gone badly. No amount of arguing is going to make that day better. This was different. It was more forward-looking. The question was no longer, can I recover the past? My question was, when a company creates pressure and repetition makes resistance feel more expensive than compliance, do I want to be the one rewarding that? For me, that answer was an obvious no. Especially because this was not about me, it was about my parents. I wanted to shield them from the stress. How far was Princess willing to take this? Would the calls get more aggressive? Would they start sending this to a collection agency, or would it get reported to the credit bureaus? For me, it was about not letting the company keep pressuring 2 people in their mid-70s to give up and decide peace of mind was worth more than $900 or being right. That's how friction wins. Enough letters, calls, or procedural obscurity that go nowhere, eventually you say, fine, enough. Take my money. Just make it stop. That's what I was unwilling to do. What I can say is, I'm glad I didn't pay the balance, and I'm glad my parents didn't either. If you're watching this because something similar is happening to you right now, here's what I take away from my half-year elective course in cruise line bureaucracy. None of this is legal or financial advice, just some observations from someone who lived through it. Document everything from the beginning. Dates, names, letters, emails, phone calls, booking numbers, dispute notices. Take screenshots. The reason our Chase dispute went as smoothly as it did is we had a clear paper trail from day one, including our attempts to resolve this issue before we ever filed the chargeback. Then, don't ever assume that a successful credit card dispute closes the issue on the merchant side. Your bank may be done with it, but it may not update the company's internal billing. Based on my conversations with Chase when the collection notices started, this situation isn't unusual. If collection notices arrive after resolved dispute, move the conversation into writing. Phone calls were great to get some information, but written correspondence creates the record. If you're helping someone else navigate this, establish in writing that you're authorized to act on their behalf. It won't stop everything immediately, but it creates a documented position that matters later. And pay attention to the emotional pressure. Collection letters create anxiety. Getting them every 2 weeks becomes draining. Phone calls are super frustrating. At a certain point, you start asking yourself whether you'd rather be right or you just want to be done with it. And sometimes being done is the right answer. I'm genuinely not judging you if that's your choice. Life is short and peace has real value. Just make that choice consciously and don't let friction make it for you. So, I hope this is the end of my cruise saga. What started as a failed vacation somehow became a case study in sunk costs, chargeback, corporate friction, and a goodwill gesture for loyal customers that doesn't show up on the Captain Circle benefit page. Because across all of this, here's what I keep coming back to. These things don't just cost money. They cost attention. It costs energy. They take up space in your life that should belong to something better, more important. And that's really where my channel is headed, looking at hidden incentives, bad systems, and human decision traps that shape our lives so we can see them more clearly and make better choices, ideally with fewer collection letters. If this helped you understand what can happen after a credit card dispute, or made you feel a little less alone in dealing with a company that seems impossible to reach in any useful way, I'm glad I shared it. And to everyone who reached out after the first video with stories about travel, family, illness, aging parents, and the value of time with people you love. Thank you. That was always the real point. Sometimes the most valuable thing you can recover is not the money. It's the rest of your life. So, cheers.
I'm sorry. I'm having difficulty understanding. To better help you, I will need you to tell me the reason for your call. Is there anything else I can help you with today? I know you'd like to speak with an agent, but I might be able to help you even faster. What else can I assist you with?